The usually peaceful town of Riverdale had always been known for its tranquility and close-knit community. Neighbors looked out for one another, and the rhythms of daily life flowed with a comforting predictability. However, a subtle unease had begun to creep into the familiar fabric of the town, manifesting in the form of unsettling rumors that whispered through the streets like a cold wind. It started with scattered reports of odd behavior. People spotted wandering the streets at odd hours, their movements jerky and their eyes vacant. Some claimed to have seen individuals attacking others, biting and clawing with a feral intensity that sent chills down the spines of those who witnessed it. But when the victims of these attacks failed to show up at their jobs or homes the next day, the townsfolk began to grow deeply concerned. Dave, the owner of the local diner, had heard the whispers from his regular customers. "Did you hear about the Johnson girl? They say she just up and disappeared after that attack on Main Street." He shook his head, wiping down the counter with a grimace. "The sheriff says it's all just nonsense, but I don't know. Something doesn't feel right." Across town, retired Marine Steve Granger listened intently as his neighbor, Mrs. Wilkins, recounted her harrowing experience. "I was taking out the trash last night when I saw them. Two men stumbling down the alley, their faces twisted in the strangest way. One of them turned and looked right at me, and the look in his eyes, it was like there was nothing human left." She shuddered, wringing her hands. "I ran back inside and locked the doors. I haven't slept a wink since then." Steve's brow furrowed with concern. He had seen his fair share of strange things during his deployments, but the descriptions of the victims' behavior were deeply unsettling. "You say the sheriff dismissed it as a hoax?" he asked, his voice low and serious. "Maybe it's time we paid him a visit." At City Hall, Mayor Abigail Finch was hosting an emergency meeting with the chief of police and several other community leaders. The reports of attacks and disappearances had become impossible to ignore, and the town was on edge. "We need to maintain order and avoid stirring up unnecessary panic," the mayor said firmly. "The sheriff assures me this is all just a practical joke gone too far. We can't afford to have the townsfolk running around in a frenzy." Chief Daniels nodded in agreement. "We increased patrols and are looking into these claims, but so far we haven't found any credible evidence to support these stories. I know it's unsettling, but we need to keep a level head." But as the meeting adjourned, Abigail couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had been gnawing at her. The reports were too consistent, the details too chilling, to simply dismiss them as mere rumors. She resolved to dig deeper, determined to uncover the truth before the situation spiraled out of control. The unsettling whispers continued to spread through Riverdale, like shadows creeping across the town. While the authorities remained skeptical, a growing number of residents were becoming increasingly convinced that something far more sinister was at work. And as the night wore on, the sense of unease only deepened, the anticipation of the unknown weighing heavily on everyone's minds. The unease that had gripped Riverdale soon gave way to outright terror as the unsettling rumors were tragically confirmed in the most horrific manner. It was a seemingly ordinary afternoon when the first attacks occurred, catching the town completely off guard. Residents going about their daily routines suddenly found themselves confronted by a group of individuals, their movements jerky and their eyes devoid of any semblance of humanity. Without warning, these strange, zombie-like assailants launched themselves at unsuspecting victims, biting and clawing with a primal, unrelenting ferocity. Screams of panic and horror echoed through the streets as the attack unfolded. Phyllis, a local seamstress, had just stepped outside her shop when she found herself face to face with one of the attackers. "Get away from me," she cried, stumbling backwards in terror as the creature lurched towards her. But her pleas fell on deaf ears as the assailant sank its teeth into her arm, drawing blood. Phyllis let out a piercing shriek, collapsing to the ground as the creature continued its vicious assault. Nearby, young Tommy Wilkins watched in abject horror as his elderly neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, was set upon by two of the zombie-like individuals. "Somebody help!" he screamed, his voice cracking with fear, but the attackers paid him no mind. focused solely on their prey. Mrs. Henderson's cries of pain and terror struck a chord deep within Tommy, and he knew he had to do something, even if it meant risking his own life. Summoning every ounce of courage, Tommy grabbed a nearby trash can lid and charged forward, slamming it against the back of one of the assailants. The creature staggered, momentarily stunned, and Tommy seized the opportunity to pull Mrs. Henderson to safety. But as he began to drag her away, he saw with sickening realization that the other attacker had already begun to rise again, its movements seemingly unimpaired by the vicious blows it had suffered. The scene unfolding in the streets was one of pure chaos and terror. People ran in all directions, desperate to escape the relentless onslaught of the zombie-like creatures. Some tried to fight back, wielding whatever makeshift weapons they could find, but their efforts seemed futile against the uncanny resilience of the attackers. As news of the attacks spread, the town's emergency services were quickly overwhelmed. The police and fire department struggled to respond to the growing number of distress calls, their resources rapidly dwindling in the face of the escalating crisis. Mayor Finch, her face pale with shock and dread, convened an emergency meeting with the town's leadership. "This is no longer a simple matter of rumors or practical jokes," she said, her voice trembling. "We are facing a genuine threat, one that has already claimed lives and shows no signs of stopping. We need to take immediate action to protect our community." Chief Daniels nodded grimly. "My officers are doing their best to contain the situation, but we're quickly being overrun. These creatures, or whatever they are, don't seem to be deterred by conventional means of force. We need to find a way to stop them before they spread throughout the entire town." The town's residents, their once peaceful community now shattered by the horrors unfolding around them, were left grappling with the harsh reality that the unsettling rumors had been all too real. The zombie-like attackers were no mere figment of imagination, but a terrifying, tangible threat that had already begun to tear Riverdale apart. As the sun set on the beleaguered town, the sense of dread and uncertainty only deepened. For the first time in Riverdale's history, the townsfolk found themselves facing an enemy unlike any they had ever encountered before, one that seemed impervious to conventional means of defense and whose appetite for destruction knew no bounds. The town of Riverdale was rapidly descending into chaos as the horrific attacks by the zombie-like creatures continued unabated. Despite the mounting evidence, however, a significant portion of the community remained skeptical, clinging to the belief that the whole situation was nothing more than an elaborate hoax. At the heart of the division was the mayor's office and the local law enforcement. While Chief Daniels and his officers were clearly overwhelmed by the scale of the crisis, they were still hesitant to fully acknowledge the threat for what it was. "These are just a bunch of troublemakers, nothing more," Daniels insisted during an emergency town hall meeting. "We increased patrols and are doing everything in our power to maintain order. But I won't have the town descending into mass hysteria over some wild rumors." The mayor, Abigail Finch, stood by the chief's side, her expression grim but resolute. "I understand the fear and uncertainty we're all feeling," she said, "but we can't afford to panic. The authorities are handling this situation, and I can assure you that we have everything under control." However, her words did little to assuage the growing unease of the gathered residents. Steve Granger, the retired Marine, stood up, his face etched with concern. "With all due respect, Mayor Finch, the situation on the ground tells a very different story. My neighbors and I have witnessed these attacks firsthand, and they are no mere pranks. These creatures, these zombies, for lack of a better word, are a genuine threat to our community." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd, and Finch's expression hardened. "I understand your concerns, Mr. Granger, but we simply cannot validate these outlandish claims without proper evidence. The sheriff has assured me that these reports are unfounded, and I'm inclined to trust his judgment." The tension in the room was palpable as the residents who had witnessed the attacks voiced their protests, only to be dismissed by the mayor and the chief of police. It was clear that the town was deeply divided, with one side clinging to the belief that the whole situation was nothing more than a hoax, while the other grappled with the terrifying reality of the zombie-like threat. As the meeting adjourned, Dave, the diner owner, shook his head in frustration. "Can you believe the nerve of those two? Telling us we're just imagining things," he said to his longtime customer, Mrs. Wilkins. The elderly woman nodded, her hands trembling. "I saw them with my own eyes, Dave. Those _things aren't human. And the mayor and the chief are just sweeping it all under the rug." She sighed heavily. "If they won't do anything to protect us, then we'll have to take matters into our own hands." Across town, the Wilkins family was having a similar discussion. Young Tommy, his eyes wide with fear, recounted his harrowing encounter with the zombie-like assailants. "I tried to help Mrs. Henderson, but they just kept coming back. How are we supposed to stop them?" His father, John, wrapped a comforting arm around his son's shoulders. "I don't know, son, but we can't just sit back and let these _things destroy our town. We need to do something, even if the mayor and the police won't." As the night fell over Riverdale, the division within the community only deepened. While the authorities continued to dismiss the reports of the zombie-like attacks, a growing number of residents were taking matters into their own hands, forming impromptu defense groups and stockpiling whatever makeshift weapons they could find. The town that had once been known for its tranquility and close-knit community was now torn apart by disbelief and uncertainty, with no clear path forward as the threat of the undead horde continued to loom ever larger. As the zombie-like attacks continued to ravage Riverdale, it became increasingly clear that the town's leadership was unwilling or unable to effectively confront the growing threat. With the authorities dismissing the reports and the community divided, a small group of unlikely survivors realized that their only hope for survival was to flee the doomed town before it was completely overrun. Among them was Lily, a young mother whose husband had been one of the early victims of the zombie attacks. Cradling her young son, Ethan, in her arms, she knew they had to get out of Riverdale before the nightmarish situation spiraled even further out of control. "We can't stay here, Ethan," she whispered, her voice shaking with fear and determination. "It's not safe anymore. We have to find a way to get out of this town, no matter what it takes." Lily's neighbor, Steve Granger, the retired Marine, had a similar realization. Despite his attempts to convince the mayor and the police to take decisive action, his pleas had fallen on deaf ears. Grabbing a duffel bag and a collection of weapons from his days in the service, he knew he had to take matters into his own hands. "I'm not going to sit back and wait for those _things to come knocking on my door," he said grimly, as he loaded the bag into the back of his old pickup truck. "If the authorities won't do anything, then I'll have to." Lily approached him, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and hope. "Steve, please, you have to help us. Ethan and we have to get out of here, but I don't know how to do it." Steve considered her for a moment, then nodded. "Hop in. We're getting out of this hellhole, and I know just the place to go." Joining them was Samantha, a tech-savvy teenager who had been monitoring the situation from the safety of her home. She had seen the chaos unfolding in the streets and knew that staying in Riverdale was no longer an option. "My parents are out of town, and I've been trying to track the spread of these _zombies_, she said, sliding into the back seat of the truck. "There's a military outpost about 50 miles from here that might be our best chance at finding safety." As they hurriedly gathered their supplies and fortified the old delivery van, the trio knew that their window of opportunity was rapidly closing. The sounds of screams and the stench of death hung heavy in the air, a constant reminder of the horrors they were fleeing. With a deep breath, Steve started the engine and eased the van out onto the chaotic streets of Riverdale. Lily clutched Ethan close, her heart pounding as they navigated the zombie-infested roads, praying they would make it to the outpost before it was too late. Samantha kept a watchful eye on their GPS, her fingers flying across the tablet's screen as she monitored the situation. "There are more of them up ahead," she called out, her voice tense. "We need to find another way around." Steve gritted his teeth, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "Hang on, everyone. This is going to get rough." As they weaved through the abandoned vehicles and the shambling, zombie-like figures, the group's desperation only grew. They knew that their only chance at survival lay in reaching the rumored military outpost, but the journey itself was fraught with peril. With their hearts in their throats, the small band of survivors pressed on, their resolve hardening in the face of the overwhelming adversity. They were determined to escape the doomed town of Riverdale, no matter what it took, for their own sake, and for the sake of the loved ones they had left behind. The group's desperate bid to escape the zombie-infested town of Riverdale was fraught with countless challenges and obstacles. As they navigated the apocalyptic landscape, their determination to reach the rumored military outpost was tested at every turn. Samantha's eyes were glued to the tablet, her fingers flying across the screen as she tracked the movement of the zombie horde. "There's a large group of them up ahead, blocking the main road," she reported, her voice tense. "We're going to have to find another way around." Steve gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles turning white. "Hang on, everyone. This is going to get rough." Lily clutched Ethan close, her heart pounding as she braced herself for the perilous journey ahead. The van lurched and bounced as Steve steered it down a narrow, debris-strewn alley, the sound of the zombies' moans and snarls echoing all around them. Suddenly, a massive obstruction loomed before them. A tangle of abandoned vehicles, their occupants long since gone. Steve cursed under his breath, slamming on the brakes. "We're not getting through that." Samantha's eyes widened. "There's another way, but it's going to be even more dangerous. We'll have to go through the old industrial district. It's crawling with those _things_." Lily's breath caught in her throat. "Is there no other option?" she pleaded, her voice barely above a whisper. Steve turned to face her, his expression grim but resolute. "I'm afraid not, ma'am. This is our only chance. We have to take the risk." With a deep breath, he put the van in gear and pressed forward, weaving through the maze of abandoned cars and trucks. The zombies were everywhere, their movements jerky and their eyes devoid of any trace of humanity. Lily and Ethan huddled in the back seat, trying to keep as low as possible, while Samantha and Steve kept a vigilant watch, ready to react at a moment's notice. As they navigated the treacherous terrain, the group encountered one obstacle after another. A fallen power line blocked their path, forcing them to backtrack and take an even riskier detour. Abandoned vehicles, their doors hanging open, dotted the landscape, a grim reminder of the fate that had befallen their previous occupants. Tensions ran high as the group faced each new challenge, their nerves frayed and their resources dwindling. Samantha's tablet beeped, and she let out a gasp. "There's a horde of them up ahead. Dozens, maybe more. We're not going to be able to get through." Steve's jaw tightened. "We have to try. We're not turning back now." With a deep breath, he pressed the accelerator, the van lurching forward as it plowed through the crowd of zombies. Lily and Ethan clung to each other, their eyes squeezed shut. As the van rocked and shuddered, the sickening sounds of impact and the zombies' inhuman cries filling the air. Time seemed to stand still as they barreled through the horde, but finally they emerged on the other side, the van's exterior covered in a grisly coating of blood and viscera. Samantha's eyes were wide with shock, but she managed a shaky smile. "We made it." Lily let out a sob of relief, clutching Ethan even tighter. Steve, his face etched with grim determination, kept his eyes fixed on the road ahead. "We're not out of the woods yet. The outpost is still a long way off, and we can't afford to let our guard down." As the van rumbled on, the group knew that their journey was far from over. The challenges they had faced so far were merely a prelude to the horrors that still lay ahead, and their only hope for survival lay in reaching the safety of the military outpost. A beacon of hope in the midst of the rapidly unraveling chaos. After the harrowing journey through the zombie-infested streets of Riverdale, and the treacherous roads beyond. The small group of survivors finally reached the rumored military outpost. As they approached the heavily fortified compound, a sense of cautious relief washed over them, knowing that they had managed to escape the doomed town and reach what they hoped would be a sanctuary. The outpost perimeter was surrounded by towering concrete walls, razor wire, and armed guards stationed at regular intervals. Samantha peered out the van's window, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and trepidation. "This place looks well equipped to handle the zombie threat," she murmured. Steve nodded, his grip on the steering wheel tightening. "Let's hope they're willing to take us in," he said, his voice low and serious. As they approached the main gate, a voice crackled over a loudspeaker. "Identify yourselves and state your business." Steve leaned out the window. "My name is Steve Granger, and this is Lily and her son, Ethan. We're refugees from Riverdale, and we're hoping to find shelter and assistance here." There was a brief pause, then the gates began to slowly swing open. "Proceed with caution. We'll have someone escort you to the command center." Letting out a sigh of relief, Steve guided the van through the gates, which closed swiftly behind them. As they pulled up to the main building, a team of heavily armed soldiers emerged to greet them, their expressions stern but their movements disciplined. A tall, imposing figure strode towards them, his uniform bearing the insignia of a commander. "Welcome to Fort Belmont," he said, his voice deep and authoritative. "I'm Colonel Donovan, the commanding officer here. We've been monitoring the situation in Riverdale and the surrounding area." Lily, clutching Ethan close, stepped forward. "Please, sir, can you help us? Riverdale has been overrun, and we barely managed to escape. Is it safe here?" Donovan's expression softened slightly. "For the moment, yes. This outpost has been fortified to withstand the zombie threat. But the situation is escalating rapidly, and we're still trying to determine the full extent of the outbreak." Steve stepped up beside Lily. "What can you tell us about these zombies? We've seen them with our own eyes, but we don't know what's causing this or how to stop them." Donovan's brow furrowed. "That's the million-dollar question, I'm afraid. Our intelligence suggests this is a nationwide crisis, with reports of similar attacks and outbreaks in multiple states. We're still trying to gather information and formulate a response, but the situation is becoming increasingly dire." Lily's eyes widened in dismay. "Nationwide. Then my husband and all the others we left behind in Riverdale, they could be." She trailed off, her voice breaking with emotion. Donovan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We're doing everything we can to assist those in need, but our resources are limited. For now, you and your family are safe here. We'll provide you with shelter, food, and medical care, and continue to gather intelligence on this threat." Samantha, who had been silent up until this point, spoke up. "Sir, I may be able to help with that. I've been monitoring the situation from Riverdale, and I've managed to collect some data that could be useful." Donovan's eyes widened, and he nodded approvingly. "Then you've come to the right place, young lady. Come with me, all of you. We have a lot of work to do if we're going to find a way to stop this outbreak." As the group followed the colonel into the outpost, a glimmer of hope began to take root in their hearts. They had found a safe haven, a place where they could regroup and perhaps even contribute to the effort to understand and defeat the zombie menace. But the road ahead would be long and treacherous, and they knew that the battle for their survival had only just begun. With the resources and expertise of the Fort Belmont military outpost at their disposal, the small group of survivors from Riverdale joined the effort to investigate the cause of the zombie outbreak and develop a potential solution. Colonel Donovan, the commanding officer, wasted no time in briefing them on the situation. "We've been monitoring the spread of this zombie phenomenon across multiple states, and the reports are growing increasingly dire. Whatever is causing these creatures, it seems to be spreading rapidly, and our conventional means of defense are proving largely ineffective." Samantha, the tech-savvy teenager, stepped forward, her tablet in hand. "Sir, I've been collecting data and footage from Riverdale, and I may have some insights that could help. From what I've observed, these zombies seem to be impervious to most forms of physical harm. They can sustain severe injuries, but they just keep coming back. Donovan nodded, his expression grim. That aligns with our own findings. We've tried every conventional weapon and tactic, but nothing seems to stop them permanently. It's as if they have an uncanny ability to regenerate and recover from even the most devastating injuries. Steve, the retired Marine, chimed in, his brow furrowed in concentration. So we need to find a way to completely neutralize them, not just incapacitate them. Some kind of, I don't know, a way to shut down their system for good. Precisely, Donovan replied. And that's where you all come in. We need to analyze the data Samantha has collected, conduct further research and experimentation, and see if we can't uncover the underlying cause of this zombie phenomenon. Lily, who had been listening intently, her son Ethan nestled in her arms, spoke up. But what about the people in Riverdale? And the other towns that have been affected? Aren't we going to do anything to help them? Donovan's expression softened. We're doing everything in our power to assist those affected by this crisis, but our resources are limited, and the scale of the outbreak is growing exponentially. Our primary focus has to be on finding a solution that can be deployed nationwide. Steve placed a reassuring hand on Lily's shoulder. Don't worry, Lily. If anyone can figure this out, it's these folks. And once we do, we'll go back and fight to save Riverdale and the others. Lily nodded, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and determination. All right, what do you need us to do? Over the next several days, the group immersed themselves in the research and experimentation being conducted at the outpost. Samantha pored over the data, looking for patterns and anomalies that might hold the key to understanding the zombie outbreak. Steve and Lily, with their first-hand experience, provided invaluable insights into the behavior and capabilities of the undead creatures. Meanwhile, the outpost's scientists and medical staff worked tirelessly, conducting experiments and running tests on samples collected from the zombies. They examined the victims' physiology, looking for any clues that might reveal the underlying cause of the outbreak. As the investigation progressed, the group began to uncover disturbing revelations. The zombies seemed to be driven by a primal, insatiable hunger, and their bodies exhibited an uncanny ability to regenerate and repair even the most severe injuries. It was as if they were operating on a completely different biological system, one that defied conventional medical understanding. Donovan, his brow furrowed in concentration, reviewed the latest findings with the team. So this isn't just some kind of virus or infection, as we initially suspected. There's something much more fundamental at work here, something that's rewriting the very rules of human biology. Samantha nodded, her eyes filled with a mixture of fascination and dread. It's like they're not even human anymore, sir. Whatever's causing this, it's changing them on a cellular level, transforming them into something. _else_. The gravity of the situation weighed heavily on everyone in the room. They were facing an enemy unlike anything they had ever encountered before, one that threatened to upend the very foundations of the world they knew. But with determination in their hearts and a glimmer of hope in their minds, they continued their relentless search for a way to stop the zombie menace and save what remained of their shattered world. As the group's research and investigations at the Fort Belmont military outpost began to shed light on the nature of the zombie outbreak, a bold plan began to take shape, one that would pit them against the horrors that had devastated the town of Riverdale and countless other communities. Colonel Donovan, his expression grim but resolute, gathered the team of survivors and scientists. Based on the data we've collected, it's clear that conventional weapons and tactics are simply not enough to stop these creatures. We need to find a way to permanently neutralize them. And that means going straight to the source. Samantha, her eyes alight with determination, stepped forward. Sir, our findings suggest that the zombies are driven by a fundamental biological transformation that alters their entire system. If we can find a way to reverse or counteract that transformation, we may be able to stop them for good. Steve, the veteran Marine, nodded in agreement. That means we need to go back to Riverdale and confront the problem at its roots. We can't just sit here and hope the outbreak will stop on its own. Lily, cradling her son Ethan, spoke up, her voice laced with a mixture of fear and resolve. But how can we do that? Riverdale is overrun. We barely made it out alive. And what about the people still trapped there? Donovan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. That's where you all come in. We've been preparing a specialized team to lead a counterattack on Riverdale, and we want you to be a part of it. The group exchanged glances, the weight of the task before them palpable. But they all knew that this was their chance to fight back, to reclaim their home, and perhaps even find a way to stop the zombie menace for good. With a nod, Steve stepped forward. "Count me in, Colonel. I'm ready to do whatever it takes." Lily, steeling herself, followed suit. "If there's a chance we can save the people of Riverdale, then I'm in too. Ethan and I are with you." Samantha, her eyes burning with determination, joined them. "I'm ready to put everything I've learned to use. Let's do this." Donovan smiled, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "Excellent. We'll be deploying a team of our best soldiers, along with any volunteers from the outpost, to spearhead the operation. Your expertise and first-hand knowledge will be invaluable." The plan was set in motion, and over the next several days, the group worked tirelessly alongside the outpost personnel to prepare for the daring mission. They refined their strategies, fine-tuned their equipment, and rehearsed their tactics, all the while steeling themselves for the challenges that lay ahead. Finally, the day of the counterattack arrived. The team, decked out in specialized gear and armed with cutting-edge weaponry, gathered at the outpost's gates, their faces etched with a mixture of fear and resolve. As they prepared to depart, Donovan addressed them one last time. "Remember, the objective is to reclaim Riverdale, rescue any survivors, and find a way to neutralize the zombie threat permanently. Failure is not an option. The fate of the entire region rests on your shoulders." Steve, his expression hardened by years of military service, nodded. "We understand, sir. Riverdale is our home, and we'll fight to the last man to save it." With that, the convoy of armored vehicles and heavily armed soldiers rolled out, their destination the beleaguered town of Riverdale. As they approached the outskirts, the scale of the zombie infestation became painfully clear. The streets were clogged with shambling, undead figures, their hunger for destruction seemingly insatiable. But the team was undaunted. Guided by Samantha's intel and the first-hand knowledge of Steve, Lily, and the other survivors, they launched a coordinated assault, using a combination of specialized weaponry and strategic maneuvers to cut a path through the zombie horde. The battle raged on, a desperate struggle for the very soul of Riverdale. But as the team pushed deeper into the town, their resolve only grew stronger. They were fighting not just for their own survival, but for the sake of their community, their loved ones, and the entire region that had been devastated by the zombie outbreak. In the end, the fate of Riverdale, and perhaps the entire world, hung in the balance as the team prepared to deliver the decisive blow against the undead menace. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: they would not go down without a fight.